This lovely manhwa is titled I Became a Level 999 Mastermind Demon King. If you love stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. The Duke and Duchess stood frozen as they watched their child scream and cry, reaching out to them while shouting that a monster from the underground was coming. The Duke of the Blessed Grace Empire, Rubelite, could only think of an incident from 10 years ago when his son, born through his concubine, had suffered from terrifying auditory hallucinations. That memory still haunted him. He remembered the child imprisoned beneath the estate, the cursed Reina Rubelite, who had manifested dark magic at the young age of 8. She was the hidden first daughter of Duke Rubelite, a child said to burn everything she touched. 10 years ago, the Duke had ordered Reina to be locked underground and commanded that everything she had ever touched be erased, whether it was an object or a person. That night, as his son collapsed into another crisis, the Duke clenched his teeth in fear and anxiety. Without hesitation, he ordered the guards to bring Reina out of the underground immediately. When the guards descended below, what they witnessed forced them to rush back and call for the Duke at once. The moment he laid eyes on Reina, shock washed over him. The power surrounding her was overwhelming, far beyond what he remembered. Panic rose in his chest, and he immediately ordered the guards to prepare the carriage and remove her at once, demanding she be taken far away and out of his sight. In the Grace Empire, there was a prophecy passed down through generations. It said, when the wrathful demon's power overwhelms and plunges the world into darkness, then the era of the demon shall come. Seeing the darkness pouring out from Reina's power, panic spread through everyone. They wondered if the prophecy was finally coming true. With what they were witnessing, many were convinced she was a demon. Still, a few doubted whether she was truly the demon spoken of in the prophecy. The servants trembled in fear. One of the maids, shaking badly, grabbed a statue of the Holy Saintess and threw it at Reina. It struck Reina's head hard and fell to the ground with a loud sound. Everyone turned to stare at the maid who had done it, including Reina herself. Reina's eyes widened in rage, and upon seeing this, the Duke wondered if this was truly the end. He feared that they were all about to die, just as the prophecy had foretold. The servants began pointing at the hard objects around them, urging one another to throw anything they could find at her. Reina, whose hands and body were tightly bound, could only glare at them. The carriage had been fully loaded with everything as the Duke had instructed. The servants returned to the underground and informed him that it was ready. The Duke looked at Reina, who was terrifying everyone simply by standing there, and decided to step closer to her. But before he could steady himself, his foot twisted and he fell hard to the ground, shaking in fear. Reina stepped closer to him, flames of rage seeming to surround her. The Duke squeezed his eyes shut, shouting for help and begging her to spare his life. At that moment, the ropes binding Reina loosened on their own. She leaned closer to him, glaring down, then suddenly laughed and told him to consider it child support. The Duke was completely frightened. Finally, Reina got into the carriage and the entire household gathered around, watching her closely and wondering if she was truly leaving. The Duke himself questioned whether he would really go away. His thoughts returned to the prophecy and to the destruction spread throughout the mansion. Just as the carriage was about to move, Reina asked them to wait. She glanced at everyone through the window and fear filled their hearts. The Duke mumbled to himself, convinced that she would not leave so easily. "Pardon me, I'm sorry to bother you," Reina said as she stuck her head out of the window, asking them to bring her a pillow. Everyone was shocked to hear her calmly ask for a pillow so she could lie down comfortably in the carriage. They quickly did as she requested and then stood still, watching as the carriage finally moved away. The Duke and his household could not believe that she had truly left. Deep down, the Duke wished she would vanish from the world completely. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Reina slept peacefully, resting comfortably on soft bedding and pillows, with the Saintess statue lying there on her chest. The carriage rider drove in panic, his hand shaking as he held the reins tightly. He kept mumbling to himself, reminding himself that he was only doing this because they promised him a huge reward in return. Still, fear sat heavily in his chest. As the carriage moved forward, Reina's power began to leak out from inside, filling the air with pressure. The rider felt it immediately and panicked even more. Reina calmly told him that if he was going to start shouting about the demon from the prophecy like everyone else, then he should just collapse now while she was still being nice. The man screamed in terror as her hands reached out toward him. Within seconds, he jumped from his seat and fainted hard on the ground. Reina stood over him, laughing at how easily she had scared him to death when she only wanted to knock him out for a moment. She tried to pull her power back in and let out a tired sigh, mumbling to herself. She could not believe that 1 whole month had already passed, and she still could not fully control her powers. Reina Rubelite. In the game, This World is with the Power of Love, Reina was known as the one who tormented the female lead until the very end. In the end, she was defeated as the final boss by nothing more than the power of love. Thinking about it now, Reina felt it was ridiculous. A powerful demon defeated by love instead of real magic? How pathetic, she thought. She could not understand why the pitiful owner of this body had fallen to such a weak and foolish power. In her past life, she had been born into a poor home, surrounded by many siblings. Her parents had no money, and she was the youngest and sickest child. There was no money for her treatment, and even if there was, it would not have helped. There were no signs of recovery at all. She grew to resent God for everything. When her life was finally coming to an end, she felt relief, even though she died alone in a freezing room. At least, she thought, she would disappear forever. But after her death, she found herself standing in the afterlife. A shadow shaped like lightning appeared before her, guiding her forward. She knew at once that it was the goddess of death who had come to judge her. She called it pathetic for appearing now, instead of letting her be born with a healthy body and into a wealthy family. "What will happen to me now for the sin of resenting God all my life?" she asked. "Am I going to hell?" She expected the worst answer, but instead she was shocked. She was told that she would receive the benefit of being reborn again. "Benefit?" she asked, doubting those words. The goddess told her that she would be allowed to choose how she wanted to be reborn. She would be granted her desire and be born into whatever life she wished. Hearing that she could make such a choice left her stunned. She said she wanted to be reborn as someone cherished and loved by everyone, someone who could help others no matter the situation. Even as she said it, she felt sad, thinking such a person might not even exist. But the goddess told her that such people did exist, and that they were extraordinary beings who used their power at any cost to save the world. She wondered if she could really become such a being. Is anything possible? Can I really be anyone I want? She then said there was someone she wanted to be like. When asked who, she explained that before she died, there was a character in a game she admired. She mentioned the game's name, This World is with the Power of Love, but suddenly realized she could not remember the character's name. In that game, the player chose the name at the beginning, so the character did not truly have one. She tried to explain further, saying that in the game there was a villainess named Reina Rubelite who reached level 999. Before she could finish explaining, the goddess told her it understood. Reina froze instantly. "No, wait!" she shouted, but it was already too late. The goddess had begun granting her wish without allowing her to finish. Reina hadn't even been able to say that she wanted to be reborn as the female lead, the one who was tormented by the villainess and later won with the power of love. The goddess simply wished her happiness in her new life as the wish was granted. "Excuse me?" Reina said in confusion, and then everything went black. And of course, when she woke up, she found herself lying in a dungeon with rats crawling around her. It was at that moment she realized she was doomed. This was not what she wanted at all. She sprang up from the ground the moment she noticed the cockroaches crawling around her. She could not believe she had been brought to such a filthy place. But now, things were already like this. There was no use complaining. She knew she had to find her way out of this mess. According to the game, the time for Reina to go outside was coming soon. Once Reina stepped out, the world would be plunged into darkness, and the female lead of this world would appear to confront her. "That is never going to happen," Reina said fiercely, adding that she would live this life as unrelated to the game's story as possible. Looking at the coachman lying unconscious on the ground, she let out a tired sigh, muttering about how troublesome the situation was. "Mister, she called. The man responded without realizing it, and Reina smiled slightly, thanking her luck because she had been worried he would never wake up. "Are you all right, mister?" she asked the moment he opened his eyes. The man screamed in fear, then dropped to his knees begging and apologizing again and again. Reina quickly told him not to do that. Instead, she said it was a relief that he was finally awake because she had been worried about him. Still trembling, the man apologized for making her worry. Reina could hardly believe what she was seeing, but then again, it was unavoidable. After all, she was someone everyone believed would one day end the world. She calmly told him to get back on the carriage so they could continue their journey. She sat quietly for a moment, then suddenly called out to the coachman again, asking when they would arrive. The man trembled as he replied that they would soon reach the carriage station. Reina thought to herself that carriages like this were only used by nobles and royals, so it seems he was eager to hand her over as quickly as possible. She understood it was not truly his fault. It was all because of the prophecy. Still, no matter what, she was his daughter. They soon arrived at the carriage station. It was a huge stone building, and the guards at the gate immediately allowed them to pass when they saw the mark of Duke Rostein. As Reina looked around, she was amazed by its size. It felt different from the game. Being inside the game world felt unreal, but still, she thought to herself, the journey had only just begun. Suddenly, her eyes shut tightly as bright light flooded her vision. She squinted, shocked by how dazzling it was, and realized they had already arrived. Stepping out of the carriage, she stared ahead in disbelief. "Don't tell me that mansion is what the Duke gave me?" she asked. The coachman read from his papers and confirmed that this place was called the Mansion of Abyss, exactly as written in his instructions. This place was located in the Winter Snow Duchy of the Empire. When the Empire was first founded, the Emperor had granted the northern lands to the first Duke. That land had been filled with chaos and unrest. The Duke was entrusted with protecting the Empire using powerful abilities passed down through his family for over 1,000 years. Generation after generation, the Dukes of the Winter Snow family continued to guard the north, but the Demon King grew to resent that power and placed a terrible curse on the ducal family. Monsters flooded the northern lands, and both the Duke and Duchess met their deaths. Amid the chaos, someone inherited that great power. Their eldest son, Rostein, survived. The high priest bowed deeply before Rostein, apologizing for failing to stop the Demon King's curse that had taken the family who always protected the empire. With deep regret, he asked Rostein to continue guarding the north, just as his family had always done, because the Demon King was still seeking to take control of the northern lands. The ruler of darkness, the one said to wish to cover the world in malice, was a being no one had ever truly seen. No one even knew if such a being truly existed or if it was nothing more than a mystery passed down through stories. But one thing was certain, Rostein had never once doubted the prophecy spoken by the high priest. Rostein was inside his office, quietly writing through piles of paperwork, when the door suddenly burst open. A servant rushed in and called out to him, saying that a new prophecy had appeared. Monsters were predicted to rise from the northwest, specifically at the Mansion of Abyss. "Isn't that where Reina is?" The Duke stood up at once, asking if preparations had been made. The servant reported that everyone in the barracks was already on standby, waiting for his command. "We will depart immediately for the Mansion of Abyss," Rostein said coldly, "and once again, we will eliminate them all, leaving not a single one behind." Did Duke Rostein know about this and intentionally send his daughter to the dangerous Mansion of Abyss in the north? This is getting more interesting and troubling. Reina, on the other hand, could not believe what was happening. She spoke aloud in disbelief, saying it felt more like the Duke had sent her there to freeze to death. "That bloody Duke Rostein," she cursed angrily. The coachman panicked at her words, and Reina was shocked when she saw him collapse once again. "Oh no, Mr. Passed Out again. I didn't realize my powers tend to go wild whenever I get angry," she said with frustration. Reina carried the man all the way to the door, but when she tried to open it, the door would not move. She squeezed the handle, only to realize it was completely frozen. At that moment, she didn't even know how to react. She was cold, hungry, and angry all at once. Still gripping the handle tightly, she suddenly noticed the ice was melting beneath her hand. Her power was slowly thawing the frozen metal. She decided to try controlling her power the same way she had done back in the castle. When she had first been reborn, she remembered crying in the dungeon because of the cockroaches and mice crawling around her. She had stopped crying the moment she heard a strange voice calling her the Demon Lord, and and telling her to control her surroundings. She looked around but could not see anyone. Out of desperation, she gave a command using only her mind, and it worked. Thinking back to that moment, Reina wondered if she could control her power again like before. If she could, then maybe she could unfreeze the entire mansion. Gathering her focus, she finally did it. The ice covering the mansion melted away completely. She carried the coachman inside and laid him gently on a bed. As she looked around, she realized she had surrounded the entire mansion with her flames, keeping it warm instead of frozen. At last, Reina felt relaxed as she soaked in the bathtub, sighing as she said it finally felt like home. Fortunately, there's plenty of food in the house, even though it's all frozen. Melting it should do the trick, she mumbled to herself. After leaving the bath, she opened the wardrobe and found it filled with clothes prepared just for her. She smiled as she looked through them, noticing that the style was a bit outdated compared to what noble women wore now. Still, it was far better than the ragged beggar outfit she had been forced to wear ever since the dungeon. Just then, she heard the coachman's voice outside asking if she was inside. Reina told him to come in, and the man opened the door slowly, trembling from head to toe. She asked him if he wanted to go back home. The man nodded quickly and replied that his daughter and elderly in-laws were waiting for him back home. Reina fell silent. She knew that if he returned alive, that foolish father of hers would not let him off easily. In the game, Duke Rostein had slaughtered all the servants who had witnessed Reina's powers. Looking at this innocent coachman, the man who had managed to bring her all the way here and would surely succeed in returning, she knew his fate was sealed. He would end up dying at the Duke's hands, and most likely his family would be killed as well. His life was already as good as dead. "I'm sorry, but you cannot go back to him," Reina said coldly, and her power began to stir once more. The coachman looked shocked. Reina told him there was no way he was leaving her alone in such a large mansion without a servant. He would stay and take care of her until someone came to rescue him. "Don't worry, I will pay you generously," she added calmly. She glanced at a golden statue of Duke Rostein nearby, and in the next moment, its hand fell off with a heavy sound. The hand was made of pure gold. The coachman stared at it in disbelief. Reina asked if it was not enough. She also told him there was plenty of food on the first floor and that he could help himself. With that, Reina turned and walked away, saying she would continue exploring the mansion. The coachman's eyes filled with tears as he clutched the golden hand tightly. He had been desperate to survive, yet she had hired him instead. In his heart, he accepted it. From that moment on, she was his lord. Finally, one follower had been acquired. Reina stepped out into the open space of the mansion grounds. Immediately, she noticed something round and white lying on the ground, almost like a snowball. As she moved closer, she realized it was a white rabbit curled up on the floor. Meanwhile, back at the Rostein estate, the Duke clenched his teeth in anger, mumbling to himself. He was certain that child Reina would eventually manifest as the Demon King. If that happened and the Saintess saved the world, even the Rostein family would not escape destruction. The Duke slammed his table on the table, swearing to himself that he would never allow that future to come true. He asked a servant whether Reina had arrived at the Mansion of Abyss yet. The servant replied that she must have arrived by now. "I will send an assassin there before Reina goes berserk," the Duke said coldly, leaving the servant frozen in shock. He planned to erase her from the world before she could bring ruin. Back at the mansion, Reina stared at the white rabbit, feeling her heart swell, not with anger, but with joy. "It's so cute," she said, leaning closer. The rabbit growled at her. Reina's eyes sparkled with affection, and she asked if it was growling to intimidate her. The rabbit shuffled away, clearly uncomfortable, but everything it did looked adorable to her. Before she knew it, the rabbit began to run. Reina watched happily, laughing as she said she could not believe this was supposed to be a monster. She imagined living among monsters like this and decided that being the Demon King was not so bad after all. After all, that would make her the master of all monsters, especially the cute ones like this. Suddenly, a voice spoke from behind her, asking what she was doing. Reina froze and slowly turned her head. Standing there was Rostein. The moment she saw his face, her eyes widened in surprise. "What a handsome character," she thought. "This is a monster-infected area. Leave this mansion at once," Rostein said coldly. Reina froze for a second, then pointed at him in annoyance. She asked if he had barged into my yard just to tell me to leave. I finally managed to get my own house and you're telling me to leave? One of the guards behind Rostein yelled, calling her rude. Rostein stared at her, feeling a strange sense of oppression coming from her presence. Reina confidently told him that this was her mansion and that he was the one who needed to leave. Rostein turned away, saying he was heading out to hunt monsters and that she should leave before he returned. Reina shouted back that even if he came back, there was no way she was leaving, so he should stop wasting her time. They left soon after. While walking away, one of the guards whispered that this was the first time someone had lived in the Mansion of Abyss since that person long ago. Rostein replied that it was a dangerous place and that no one should live there anymore. As they walked further away, Rostein glanced back at the mansion. At first he thought it was his imagination, but now he was certain. Why were there no snow stores surrounding it anymore? Back in the mansion, Reina was furious. She could not believe that some handsome man had suddenly appeared and ordered her to leave. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She wondered why she did not recognize such an important face from the game, and each time she remembered his words, her hands clenched tightly in frustration. I plan to gain economic freedom and live a quiet, retired, middle-aged life here, she complained loudly, then firmly concluded that there was no way she was leaving this place. The next day, guards returned to the mansion and showed Reina an official document. It stated that the mansion now belonged to the Duke of Rostein of the Northern Winter Snow Duchy, due to several years of unpaid taxes. According to the document, she was required to leave immediately. Reina and her servant stood frozen in shock. Did you say she wouldn't leave? Rostein asked when the guard reported back to him. The guard also informed him that the girl was a princess of the Rubelite ducal family. Rostein sighed softly and said she would surely leave once the monsters descended and frightened her. There was no need to use force. All he had to do was surround the area with guards so she would not get hurt. Monsters, you say? Unfortunately for Mr. Handsome, she was their master. That night, the full moon hung high in the sky as Rostein returned to his chamber. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed a white rabbit lying quietly on the floor. He called it Luca, speaking softly as he knelt beside it. With monsters appearing more often lately, he felt that the day of the Demon King's arrival was drawing near. He gently told Luca to hang in there, promising that he would eliminate the Demon King and lift the curse once and for all. Back at the mansion, things were still messy, but the entire house was wrapped in a thin layer of warmth created by magic. Thanks to the coachman cleaning tirelessly, the place had begun to look livable. Reina stood by the window, mumbling to herself that the real problem was the ownership of the mansion being transferred to the Grand Duke of the North. His men were everywhere, watching closely. She soon noticed that there were no fresh vegetables in the mansion at all. Deciding to investigate, she went to the market with her servant. There, an old woman told her not to expect fresh fruits or vegetables in the north. Before, the north was warm enough to grow crops, the old woman said, but now there are constant blizzards and it has become impossible to grow anything. Reina found this strange. People claimed the blizzards and monsters were caused by the devil, but she knew the truth. She had been locked away for years and done nothing. So how did all this happen? Back at the Rubelite ducal estate, the Duke and the High Priest were having a meal together when the High Priest suddenly spoke, saying that the prophecy was deviating. The Duke froze and demanded to know what he meant. The Demon King should have already appeared here in the east by now, the High Priest said, leaving the Duke in shock. The priest blamed his own lack of virtue as High Priest for the situation. The Duke quickly rejected that idea, saying there had to be another reason. Could it be possible for the Demon King to appear in the north, or the south, or even the west? At that moment, a servant rushed in and announced that the Duke of Winter Snow had arrived. He had come to request food supplies for the north and also wished to ask about the young lady. The Duke's eyes widened in shock, while the High Priest silently watched. Rostein sat in the living room with the Duke and the High Priest, calmly explaining that there was a serious food shortage in the north. He said he had come to ask the Duke of Rubelite for food support. The Duke wore a clearly dissatisfied expression, while the High Priest smiled gently and said that the lack of food in the north was also their concern. The eastern region has many grain fields, the High Priest said, so it would be good for us to support them. The Duke nodded and agreed. Rostein then spoke about the blizzards, saying the residents were suffering greatly because of them, and that for their sake, he hoped the blizzards would stop. The High Priest looked surprised and said he felt sorry for the people when he thought about it. However, he added that stopping the blizzards would put his younger brother in danger. It would be hard to maintain his body without the blizzard, the high priest said. Rostein fell silent. His thoughts drifted to Luca. The high priest then looked at him with a strange expression and asked what he thought about the young lady. Rostein did not know how to answer. At the same time, Duke Rubelite looked completely shocked. I feel like this high priest knows something, because why wouldn't he? This man gives prophecies, right? Something felt wrong. It was hard not to feel that the high priest knew more than he was saying. After all, he was someone who dealt in prophecies. As soon as Rostein returned to the north, the people gathered around him because of the food he had brought. He ordered the guards to distribute food potions to everyone, and they followed his command. The elderly people bowed in thanks, their eyes filled with relief. However, when it was turned to Veronica, her expression twisted in disgust as she looked at the grains mixed with soil and gravel. "Are you really giving this to people to eat?" she asked loudly. Some people quickly tried to silence her. The guards warned her to watch her mouth and accept what the East had provided. Her father stepped in and told her that they should be grateful to the Duke. "I can't live like this anymore," Veronica said sadly. "I might have to leave the North." With that, she turned around and ran off. Her father called after her, but she did not stop. Reina watched quietly as people whispered among themselves, saying that Veronica used to grow high-quality crops and must be truly heartbroken now. Reina turned to her servant and told him to wait for her. She needed to talk to someone. Before he could even respond, she had already run off. At the same time, Rostein noticed someone running in the distance. When he realized who it was, his expression darkened. That was Reina Rubelite. He immediately remembered the words of her father, who once said she was not his daughter, and whether she starved or froze to death was none of the Rubelite family's concern. The Duke warned Rostein to be careful around her, claiming that Reina had shallow behavior and was a vicious woman. Looking around the mansion of Abyss, Reina discovered a patch of land that had clearly been used as a field in the past. Although the land was frozen now, she realized it was her power that kept the mansion warm. So wouldn't it be possible to use this land again, she thought to herself? Determined, Reina went after Veronica and called out her name. Veronica spun around at the sound. She took in Reina's features, dark purple eyes, silver hair with a red tinge, a luxurious dress, and immediately thought to herself, this is the crazy lady who moved into the Abyss mansion. Reina asked Veronica if it was true that she had grown high-quality crops before. Veronica sighed and explained that she had worked hard to cultivate quality crops in the barren north. She had joined forces with the villagers, carefully growing crops, and had been happy to share the well-grown grains. "But it's all over now," Veronica said sadly. "As long as this blizzard doesn't stop, nothing can grow here. If the devil who spreads the snowstorm appears, I might as well rush in and fight," Veronica added. Reina shook her head and told her that no matter how much she tried, the snowstorm wouldn't stop on its own. Then she suggested something new. Growing crops in a greenhouse. Veronica's eyes widened. How is that even possible? We can't maintain the temperature, and there isn't even enough firewood to keep the house warm. Reina smirked confidently. Don't worry about that, she thought to herself, that her power could easily handle it. Meanwhile, the guards reported to the Duke that rationing had been completed, and he praised them for their efforts. Rostein, noticing the direction Reina had gone, decided to follow. His knight asked where he was going, and he replied that he was going to see the young lady again because he needed to warn her. When they arrived, Reina appeared to have startled Veronica, who had fallen to the ground, trembling in fear. Just then, Rostein arrived with the Duke right behind him. The knight quickly asked Reina if she was harassing Veronica. Rostein glared at her coldly. Reina tried to explain, but the Duke interrupted her, saying he would take her back to the Mansion of Abyss, a place she would soon be forced to leave. On the carriageway home, Rostein and Reina sat across from each other. A tense silence hung in the air until Rostein finally spoke. "I would have definitely asked you to leave the mansion," he said calmly. Reina wore a strange expression. Déjà vu, she thought. Even in her previous life, they had been scolded by landlords. This time, she concluded firmly, I'll buy my own house no matter what. Didn't I say I'll buy back the ownership of the mansion? Why are you refusing to sell it? Aren't you short of money? She asked sharply. Rostein shook his head. That place? It's where monsters appear during blizzards. It's not suitable for a young lady like you to live in. Reina's eyes narrowed, and she muttered to herself, He's treating me like I know nothing about the world. Then she spat out proudly in her mind, I'm the devil, you fool. Trying to tease him, she smiled. The saintess will appear and save the world. I believe in her. I don't believe in the Saintus or anything like that, Rostein replied, his tone cold. Reina blinked, surprised. Why doesn't he believe in the Saintus? The devil hasn't fully appeared yet, but its power is already showing. Meanwhile, the Saintus only exists in prophecy. No one really knows if she will appear. I cannot rely on superstition to protect the North. Reina couldn't help thinking to herself that this character was making her forget what the game had been like. He must have been someone struggling hard to survive in the North. What a sense of duty, Duke Wintersnow, she thought. Rostein added, I hope you'll stop bullying my people around. Nobles who behave as they please, I don't even want to witness it. His cold words left Reina shocked. She tried to explain, I didn't harass Veronica. Before they could continue, a loud noise shook the carriage as if something was riding on top of it. Armed men appeared out of nowhere, clinging to the carriage, leaving the coachman and knight terrified. The men surrounded the carriage from all sides. What's going on? The coachman stammered, panicked. Hand over the woman with silver hair and red eyes, and you can go free, one of the men demanded. Rostein immediately tensed. The knight leapt into action, but the attackers overpowered him instantly. Just as one of them was about to strike, the Duke appeared, striking one of the men high into the air. The rest froze, eyes wide with shock. That man, he's the Duke of the North, they panicked. They were terrified to continue attacking. Rostein thought to himself, why would a mercenary group hire so many people just to capture one woman? This is suspicious. The men stammered nervously, admitting they had no knowledge that the Duke of the North would be with her. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately if you do not want to be executed right here, Rostein commanded. Just as the men began lowering their swords, a mage suddenly appeared. You idiots! Stop, Duke! I'll deal with the woman myself! The mage shouted, raising his staff, and immediately created magical weapons. Rostein's eyes widened in disbelief. They even hired a mage disguised as one of the mercenaries? The mage muttered strange, unfamiliar words. Sharp daggers shot toward the carriage, slicing through the air with deadly speed. Rostein shouted in panic, My lady, watch out! The daggers pierced the carriage but stopped abruptly in front of Reina as she manifested her powers. Flames erupted around her, filling the entire area with blinding heat. The daggers melted instantly, and everyone present shut their eyes against the overwhelming light. The mage could not believe what he was seeing. Before he could react, the staff in his hands disintegrated, and the mage, along with all his men, was stripped of their weapons and even their clothes. Rostein thought to himself, this is black flame that burns everything to ashes. But it only burned the mercenaries who attacked them. Duke Wintersnow, you made it look like I tormented Veronica earlier, Reina said, stepping out of the carriage, black flames swirling around her. She looked at Rostein coldly. I didn't harass Veronica. I only showed her the kind of magic I use. The mage stared in shock, thinking to himself that he had been contracted to kill a young girl, but they hadn't mentioned she used black magic exactly like the Demon Kings. I hope you will clear up the misunderstanding for me, Reina added, stepping closer. Rostein was too shocked to speak. The only thing he could think to do was raise his sword and point it at her. Before that, you must give me a convincing reason why you are using such ominous black magic, he shouted. Reina froze at his words. Of course, anyone in his shoes would demand an explanation. Meanwhile, Veronica was still amazed by what she had witnessed. She couldn't stop thinking about the black flames that had suddenly engulfed her. Her family panicked when they saw her riding off suddenly on horseback. Her father shouted helplessly, She's running away like this! But her mother calmly said, She isn't running away, she's going to the crazy lady's Mansion of Abyss. Rumors had already spread through town that someone had moved into the Mansion of Abyss, and it was none other than Reina Rubelite, the princess of the Rubelite family. From that day on, people called her the Crazy Princess. Rostein's knight, watching Reina in action, couldn't help mumbling to himself, She's indeed a crazy princess, or should I say, Demon King. He saw her burn everything in every direction, and he realized the limit of her power was unimaginable. Rostein, pointing his sword at her, wondered why she had approached Veronica. Was she actually planning to brainwash her into becoming her subordinate? Oh, come on, handsome, is this even the time to discuss this? Reina heard him speak and frowned, thinking to herself, what nonsense is he spouting? But why are you interrogating me right now? She yelled, pointing at the mercenaries. They're the ones you should be questioning. Immediately, the mage shouted at his men to retreat. Before anyone could react, All of them ran away, and the Duke didn't chase them. "They all ran away because of you!" Reina shouted, but her eyes widened when she saw him press the sword against her neck. Rostein spoke fiercely. "There is no wizard in the world who can use black magic. This isn't something that can be passed down or learned." "So, are you saying that I'm the Demon King just because I use black magic?" she asked, angrily. Reina knew she had to deny it as much as possible, even though she had mentioned the Demon King herself. Her expression softened, looking pitiful. "Whether I learned black magic somewhere else or not, I didn't attack them first. They did." Rostein was left speechless. He thought to himself, the power she displayed was undoubtedly that of the Demon King, yet her appearance was completely different from what he had imagined a Demon King would look like. "There is only one way to find out," Rostein said finally. He explained that his parents, the late Duke and Duchess, had died because of the Demon King's curse, and he was the only one who survived. He withdrew his sword and told her to attack him. As someone who survived the Demon King's curse, I should be able to tell if she is the Demon King or not. Reina hesitated. How is he expecting me to attack him? Then a voice inside her mind whispered that she should kill him. This is the perfect opportunity. Her eyes sparkled at the thought. If she kills him now, she'll become the owner of the house without any disturbance. Just as she was about to act, the coachman stepped between them. "Why are you having such a misunderstanding?" he asked firmly. "Even though my lady's powers were frightening at first, she provided hot water and kept the mansion warm," he explained, leaving the knight shocked. He bowed to Rostein. "Even if she is the Demon King, she has become a reformed, good Demon King." Reina smirked. "Wait a second, you think I'm the Demon King too?" she asked the coachman teasingly. At that moment, Veronica appeared on her horse, calling out, "What on earth is going on?" Back in an alley, Duke Rostein watched as his knights slaughtered all the mercenaries who had fled back to him. "We took care of all the mercenaries except one wizard who escaped," the knight reported. Duke Rostein panted, frustrated. "I should have sent an army instead," he muttered. His knight bowed. "If we did, rumors would have spread, my lord." "Rumors?" the Duke asked sharply, standing up. "It's better that they spread rumors instead." He commanded the knight to spread the word to all mercenaries and knights in the kingdom. The Demon King had appeared in the Mansion of Abyss in the northwest. This man is really evil. I understand that his daughter is the Demon King, but don't parents do everything to protect their kids? The misunderstanding about the princess bullying Veronica was cleared up thanks to Veronica's explanation. Looking at the Duke Rostein statue at the center of the mansion, now missing its hand, Rostein wondered if Reina's move to the north was because of a conflict with her father. "Huh, the first Duke of Rubelite's wrist has been severed?" The knight panicked. The coachman then took the visitors on a tour of the mansion, showing them how hot water flowed instantly whenever they turned it on, and how the mansion's temperature was maintained at a constant 24 degrees, all thanks to Reina's magic. They all looked around in awe. Rostein turned to her. "Have there been any monsters since you moved in, and did you handle them?" "If you mean intruding monsters, there is one. A very cute one at that," she said, smiling. Rostein blinked, confused. "Small and cute?" Reina led him to the garden and pointed at the white rabbit. "It comes to the house every day," she explained. Rostein was completely shocked to see that she was referring to Luca. In the east, the high priest, after consulting the statues, was interrupted by a servant. News had arrived about a rumor circulating among the mercenaries. A Demon King had appeared in the northwest. The high priest was instantly shocked. "This is different from the prophecy," he said, ordering his servants to investigate and check if it was really worth pursuing. Reina touched Luca softly, telling Rostein that it seems the monster liked it here because it was warm. "Monsters can't be this cute," she added with a small smile. Rostein thought to himself, Luca isn't a monster. Luca's body was made of snowflakes because of the Demon King's curse, yet he didn't melt in this temperature. He couldn't believe she had the ability to generate warmth while keeping Luca's body unharmed. "Princess?" he called out. Reina turned to look at him, and before she knew it, he drew his sword and swung it as if he was going to slaughter her. She immediately shut her eyes. Rostein froze, then explained, "I didn't intend to kill you. I thought you would reflexively counterattack." "What? You still think I'm the Demon King?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Stop it already. I'm just a wizard who handles fire well." Rostein sighed. I can't believe that just yet. Until I clear my doubts, I can't return full ownership of the mansion. Since the safety of the North is my responsibility, I'll find out who hired the mercenaries and attacked the princess. Reina thought to herself, I already know who that is. Since arriving at the mansion, Reina had noticed quite a lot of people who wanted to kill her, but she hadn't even given them the chance to enter the mansion before eliminating them. She thought to herself, if there's one thing that Duke overlooked, it's that a living being with a killing intent cannot survive inside my mansion. That's why he kept sending attackers. She concluded he should consider it his stroke of luck that he tested her without any real killing intent. Back in town, gossip spread like wildfire. At every corner, people whispered about how the crazy princess had moved into the mansion of Abyss. The wizard who had escaped the Duke's army and was hiding overheard some men talking about how the Rubelite daughter had ended up in the North and nobody knew why. The wizard thought to himself, the power I witnessed is definitely that of the Demon King. So does that mean the Rubelite family found out their daughter is the Demon King and tried to hide it? He smirked, leaving the place. This information will surely make me a lot of money, he thought. Back at the Abyss Mansion, Reina had already begun stabilizing the greenhouse temperature. She turned to Veronica and asked, Is the temperature okay? Veronica checked carefully and nodded. It's sufficient for the crops to grow, she said. She thought to herself in surprise, her lady had managed to create a greenhouse, but the problem was that the magic she used was black magic, like the devil's power, and didn't seem logical for someone who only wanted to grow crops. There's no way she'd be the devil, right? Veronica wondered as her lady examined every corner of the greenhouse. Back in the east, the high priest stood by the window, his expression cold. He thought to himself, according to my informers, by now the world should be filled with screams, flames, and chaos, but it's so quiet. The Demon King, who was supposed to appear long ago and cover the world in flames, had still not come. Just then, his servant appeared. High priest, this man says he met the devil in the north. The high priest glanced at him. The wizard immediately went to his knees, bowing low and greeting the high priest respectfully. Back in the greenhouse, Veronica complained, Lady, the crops die as soon as I plant them, even when I follow all the conditions. Reina frowned, saddened. No matter what was planted, the plants lost their vitality instantly. She wondered if it was because of the devil's power she had used. Just then, she felt the demonic energy within her. That's right, come to your senses already. The voice told her that the power she had wasn't meant for this, that it was useless. Veronica spoke softly, trying to encourage her. On my way to the Abyss Mansion today, I saw a long queue of people leaving the north. They are tired of the cold and hunger. Veronica looked up at her lady, eyes full of hope. You don't have to pay me anything at all. Please, don't give up, even for the north, so that we can live here. Until then, please help us. Her words touched Reina. She thought to herself that she had no intention of sharing her harvest before, but now she realized her magic wasn't always destructive. When she first used it for others and didn't harm anyone, she knew she had a good heart, just like everyone else. Reina headed to the door, determination in her eyes. I won't give up. I don't know how much help the crops here will be for the people remaining in the north, but I'll try once again. She focused her powers on the greenhouse. Meanwhile, in the east, the high priest asked the wizard, Do you mean the Rubelite family was hiding their daughter's identity in the north? The high priest asked again, What was her name? The wizard grinned evilly. Her name is Reina Rubelite, and she's the devil. Back in the greenhouse, Veronica and the coachman were shocked as they watched the plants thrive on Reina's second attempt. It's fine, it survived, and it's really beautiful, Reina said, smiling as she looked at the green crops growing everywhere. Veronica was deeply touched. The lady who uses black magic created a greenhouse with black flames, and yet grows life here. She wondered quietly if this would become proof that her lady wasn't the devil after all. Meanwhile, in the east, the high priest grinned wickedly, calling out the name Reina Rubelite. The coachman was overjoyed as he told her lady that he had finally received a reply from his daughter and wife. He explained that they hadn't responded earlier because they were in the capital and hadn't seen the letters. Reina smiled to herself, relieved that they hadn't fallen into the Duke's hands after all. She suggested that he bring both of them to the Abyss Mansion so they could all be together. He was stunned. You would do that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm really grateful." Tears threatened to spill as he spoke. He went on to explain how his daughter had gone to the National Culinary School in the capital as a child, and he hadn't seen her in years because of work. He worried how much she must have grown. Handing Reina a portrait of his daughter, he couldn't help thinking she was cute in the picture. But Reina knew that meeting her in person would be a different experience. When Mia appeared, she looked mature and strong, almost like a young man. "Nice to meet you. My name is Mia," she introduced herself politely. Her lady's reply was, "It's nice to meet you. Careful." The expression on her face betrayed a mix of surprise and curiosity. Mia had grown far beyond what she expected from the portrait. The coachman and his wife hugged tightly, holding each other as they whispered how much they had missed one another. Right in front of Reina and Mia, they kissed, ignoring everyone else completely. "Please forgive my parents' behavior," Mia said politely, bowing slightly. Reina thought to herself how mature and composed she was. As they walked into the mansion, Reina asked Mia about the National Culinary School. Mia admitted that she had attended, but her expression turned sad as she confessed that her cooking had not been impressive. "You'll probably be disappointed if you taste it," she said quietly. "You like cooking, don't you?" Reina asked gently. "Yes, I like it." Reina smiled warmly. "That's fine. I'm having beef jerky right now anyway, so I'm not picky. Why don't you become my chef?" Mia's eyes widened. I'll try my best." When Mia saw the fire in the kitchen, she froze. She had never seen black fire. "It's magic fire," Reina explained casually. Mia tilted her head. "You're not a devil, are you?" Reina chuckled, smiling at her straightforwardness. Leaning in slightly, she whispered, "As long as you cook well, I won't destroy the world." Mia grinned nervously. "Don't get your hopes up too much." When the meal was finally served, Reina was surprised at the perfectly shaped dishes. She dug in carefully, thinking to herself that this was her first time eating a different type of meal since arriving in this world. She had decided to try, no matter what. The moment the flavors hit her tongue, her eyes widened in shock. Mia called out nervously, "Is something wrong?" Reina couldn't hide her astonishment. She had never tasted anything like this in her life. This is incredible," she exclaimed. "I can't cook anything extraordinary. It's just a woman's hand," Mia said quietly, almost apologetically. Reina stared at her. "What do you mean? What did they teach you at culinary school? This is extraordinary. I've never tasted anything this delicious." A voice spoke from behind. "She's right." It was Rostein's knight, who had also been quietly eating a bowl and now had tears streaming from his face. "This dish, it's so delicious. It makes me so happy. I'm crying." Reina looked at him in surprise. "Why are you even eating here?" she asked, bewildered. Before they knew it, Mia began to cry. This was the first time anyone had given her such heartfelt praise. "They always said women can't make meals fit for nobles. I was only told to go back home," she sobbed. Reina placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Listen carefully. Here, you can cook whatever you like. All you have to do is tell me the ingredients, and I'll get them for you." Tears filled Mia's eyes as she softly whispered her thanks over and over. Meanwhile, the knight at the corner quietly shoveled the dish into his mouth, trying to hide his own delight. Far to the east, the wizard was instantly turned to ice as he delivered his information to the high priest. Duke Rostein looked shocked, but the high priest's expression was colder and more unforgiving than ever as he approached. "There are a few things I need to hear from the Duke himself about his daughter, Reina Rostein," he said, his tone icy. This looks scary. What would the high priest do if he finds out the truth? Stay tuned and watch for the next part. Back at the Winter Castle, the knight reported to Rostein about the food he ate at the princess's mansion. "Was it that delicious?" the Duke asked. The knight replied with excitement, saying the Duke would be shocked if he ever tasted it because it was extremely delicious. It's crazy that this knight came all the way back just to report about food he ate, as if he was even supposed to eat there in the first place. Rostein sighed and reminded him that he did not send him there to report such useless things. He told him to leave at once. Immediately he was gone, Rostein returned to reading his reports. As he read, his thoughts drifted back to the mercenaries who escaped that day. He had tried to track them down, but he found nothing. It was clear to him now the person behind it all had sent a full mercenary group, including a mage, just to capture one woman. That alone proved they already knew about her powers. Meanwhile, back at the Abyss Mansion, Rostein's knight was helping carry heavy goods around the estate. The sight left Reina completely shocked. This guy had a few free meals, and now he suddenly becomes such a hard-working man, her lady said, adding that she was not even sure this was what the Duke of the North sent him there to do. Veronica chuckled softly and said that at least he was being useful, and that was a good thing. According to Veronica's suggestion, her lady decided to cook and share the harvested crops with the orphans who were affected by the monsters. As the children gathered, Reina spoke to them, telling them to stand in a line and assuring them that food would reach everyone. As she turned in another direction, her eyes caught sight of someone among the children who did not look like a refugee. His clothes were neat and clearly high class. At that moment, Veronica noticed him too and called out to him, addressing him as young Master Luca. "Do you know him?" Reina asked. Veronica replied that everyone knew him because he was the second son of the Winter Snow family, young Master Luca. He's back to normal? How was that even possible? Reina was shocked and immediately panicked. She asked if that meant he was the younger brother of the Duke of the North. Soon, all the children sat down and happily ate their meals. Reina and Luca walked inside together. Luca, a frail-looking boy with sky-blue hair, told Reina that the North was a land the Winter Snow family was meant to protect. He thanked her for her help, and she smiled, saying she could not turn away when people were starving. Luca then spoke sadly, saying the North had not always been such a hard place to live. He explained that the snowstorms in the North existed because of him. Reina was stunned. He told her he was cursed and the high priest had to cast powerful magic on him. "When I think about it, the North is suffering because of me," he said quietly, adding that the thought was unbearable. Her lady gently called out to him. She squatted down and leaned closer, telling him that she did not know what his curse was, but if there was anything she could do to help him, she would surely do her best. "You can trust me. I'm a quite strong mage myself," she said with a soft smile. Luca let out a tired sigh and said he had already received a lot of help from her. Her words left her lady confused because she had no idea what he meant. Back at the Rubelite ducal estate, the Duke was informed that all the mercenaries had been withdrawn and that those who disobeyed orders had been punished. The Duke's body trembled as his thoughts returned to his meeting with the High Priest, who had accused him of committing a grave crime, hiding the Demon King. Back then, after turning the mage into ice, the High Priest told Duke Rubelite that he would not question him again. From that moment on, the Duke was expected to follow his orders. The priest leaned close and whispered that he would appreciate it if the Duke started by withdrawing the mercenaries sent to the north because of a divine law spoken by God. Remembering this, Duke Rubelite clenched his fist, cursing the high priest in his mind. When he had suggested that Reina might be the Demon King, the priest's reaction was clear excitement. The Duke could not understand what the priest meant by the divine law he mentioned. Back at the Abyss Mansion, Reina walked through the garden in confusion. She kept thinking about Luca's words and wondered why he said he had already received so much help from her when they had just met. Suddenly, she noticed the snowy creature that often wandered around the Abyss Mansion, and she froze. She remembered what Veronica had told her on their way back, that young Lord Luca was cursed by the Demon King and could only return to his true form once a month. Oh, is that it? Poor boy. Veronica had sadly said it was cruel that he could not even enjoy his youth properly. Thinking back on it now, Reina realized that the cute creature had not appeared in a while, and that it always disappeared once a month. "Could it be it's you?" she asked softly, calling out his name, Luca. "This is so sad. I wish she could truly break the curse and free him, especially since she is the new Demon King." In the north, there is one place that sends shivers down the spines of the northern people, and it is the Northern Labyrinth. It is a complex network of tunnels carved into the Cyan Mountains, like a giant anthill. The Northern Labyrinth used to release monsters only from time to time, but recently it has been spewing them out as if on a relentless rampage. At the Abyss Mansion, they discussed the issue, talking about how the situation was truly getting out of hand. Veronica complained that despite the Duke and the expedition team patrolling the mountains regularly, there was no sign that the number of monsters was decreasing. Reina felt heavy-hearted about it all. Back in town, someone suddenly bumped into Reina while running. A woman came chasing after the person, shouting that he was a thief. Reina glared at him, thinking to herself that the security around the castle had worsened quickly because the Duke of Wintersnow had gathered most of the soldiers to drive out the monsters. Her face fell as she remembered what Luca had told her about his family protecting the north. Those memories flashed through her mind, leaving her speechless. Her glare sharpened as her aura suddenly rose, and she muttered to herself that she had tried to avoid using magic in the village as much as possible, but now she had no other choice. I don't think this is a good idea. She used her magic as everyone watched and stopped the thief in his tracks. He was shocked when the magic suddenly engulfed him, leaving him unable to move. Reina walked up to him angrily, glaring as she warned him never to touch other people's belongings again. The villagers were stunned, unable to believe what they had just seen. The villagers could tell immediately that it was black magic. They began shouting at once, asking if it was dark magic. Reina yelled that she was not the thief and that they should go catch him. But after witnessing everything, no one paid attention to the thief anymore. Instead, they were terrified of her magic. She could tell everyone was on edge. After all, it was already a time when people feared the Demon King deeply, and now that she had used dark magic, it only made things worse. She regretted using it at all. Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted, "Demon King," and soon everyone joined in. Veronica appeared immediately, asking why they were acting this way, knowing fully well how much her lady had helped them. Reina turned away and told her it was useless. The villagers panicked and began to run, rushing into their homes and slamming their doors shut. In less than a minute, the entire street fell silent. Reina could tell that fear had completely taken hold of them. "It's better if I just leave," she said, and Veronica sadly followed after her. Meanwhile, from a dark corner, two priests watched everything in silence. Rostein stood with his men, all gathered together, as he addressed them firmly, saying they would not rest until the monsters were dealt with. Looking at their faces, he could tell they were all at their limit. Still, he knew that if they failed to stop the labyrinth's rampage, the North would be annihilated. Suddenly, he recalled his conversation with the high priest and how the priest had told him that the Northern Labyrinth might have been activated by the power of the Demon King. He was shocked and asked what he meant by the Demon King's power. The high priest then asked him if there was anyone in the North suspected of being the Demon King. Thinking back on it now, Rostein felt a deep sadness. Back at the Abyss Mansion, Veronica reported to her lady in fear that everyone in the market who had called her the Demon King had been burned into ashes. This is so messed up. Reina was shocked to hear that all the people who ran into their homes in fear of her were now burned inside those same houses. Who did this? Could it be the high priest? Is he trying to force her to truly become the Demon King at all costs? Why would they push her into an even worse situation? I don't like this. Reina suddenly appeared in front of Rostein and his knights who were preparing to subjugate the monsters. Sitting calmly on her horse, her body engulfed in the dark magic aura, she asked mischievously if she should just burn them all up. She asked how it looked, saying she could even wrap him in fire like this. She added that it might look a little strange, but it was actually very warm. Warm? One of the knights repeated in shock. Rostein could not say a single word. Reina looked around and asked why they were all so surprised. One of the knights shouted back, how could they not be surprised when she suddenly appeared and talked about burning everything up so casually? Rostein finally asked the princess why she was there. She replied coldly that she had come to help. Playing lightly with her magic, she told her she was there to clear out the entire Northern Labyrinth. If I burn all the monsters, then the problem will be solved, right? She asked cheerfully, leaving the Duke completely stunned. Rostein thought to himself about the princess's overwhelming power. If they could borrow that strength, they might truly be able to wipe out the monsters pouring out of the labyrinth. Reina then explained that monsters were being continuously created inside the Northern Labyrinth, so if she destroyed the labyrinth stone at its center, monsters would no longer be born. Rostein was shocked once again when she confidently said that destroying the labyrinth stone would not be difficult. "How did you get such information?" he asked, clearly shaken. He added that his lady had been fighting against the Northern Labyrinth his entire life, and this was the first time he'd ever heard of such a thing. Her lady was surprised as well, thinking to herself that she knew this because she had cleared this game several times. She smiled faintly, knowing she couldn't tell him that. Reina simply told him she had heard those rumors among the wizards. Rostein muttered under his breath that she was suspicious, just as expected. Then he said that rumors claimed her lady had been doing quite a lot in the north. First, it was said that she had given food to the villagers' children. Reina scratched the back of her head, saying, "That was really embarrassing." Rostein continued, saying it was also rumored that she had burned down villagers' houses. Harming them and then giving them medicine? Is playing with people the princess's hobby? Reina panicked immediately, saying it was a misunderstanding and that she had nothing to do with the burned houses. Rostein rode past her and said he could not march together with someone who used black magic to exterminate monsters. He explained her magic was too similar to that of the Demon King, and to prevent his men from attacks instead of the monsters, it was better they did not accept her help. He said plainly that they could not trust her. That was how Rostein and his army left her behind. Back in the east, the high priest's men bowed and reported that they had carried out his orders and that the residents would now suspect the princess. The high priest smiled, saying, now it finally felt like the gears were turning properly. It's really crazy how the high priest would kill his own people just because of one person. The high priest entered the sanctuary room, and through his mirror, he could see Rostein, Wintersnow, and his men. He smiled softly and said that although it was pitiful, Rostein's role had come to an end, and he would become a beautiful sacrifice for the saint. Raising his hand, he began to cast his magic. This man is getting really annoying. Is he planning to kill our Rostein? Back at the Abyss Mansion, Reina sat at the dinner table with everyone else, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about what Rostein had said to her earlier. She couldn't believe that after going out of her way to help, they had rejected her. Veronica sighed and said she did not know if it was right for them to eat like this when the villagers could barely sleep at night. The coachman suddenly shouted, asking if it was their fault. He said the villagers clearly rejected the princess's help, and accusing her of being the village arsonist was only because they did not know her. Our princess's flames are pure and on a completely different level from ordinary arson, he exclaimed, leaving her lady surprised by how strongly he believed in her. Just then they heard a knock on the door. Reina was surprised because no one was supposed to visit during this dangerous time. Deciding it was safer to check herself, she went to the door and opened it. Standing there was Chase, Rostein's knight. He was covered in bruises. He called out to her lady, then immediately fell to his knees and burst into tears, begging her to help them. Bowing his head deeply, he cried and pleaded with her to come and save their lord. This is so annoying. If he had accepted her help the first time, none of this would have happened. They brought Chase into the house and treated his wounds. Everyone surrounded him with shocked expressions, unable to speak. After calming down a little, he began to explain what had happened. When they first entered the Northern Labyrinth, it was strangely easy. There were no monsters at all. As they went deeper and deeper, they finally found the labyrinth stone her lady had mentioned. But all of a sudden, monsters manifested out of nowhere in full force. Just thinking about it still terrified him. Only he and a few soldiers managed to escape. The Duke, who stayed behind to stop the monsters until the very end, was still inside. Everyone was stunned, especially Reina. Chase continued trembling as he begged her lady to help them, saying at this point the entire north was in danger. At the same moment, monsters were storming through the town. The soldiers stationed outside the Duke's manor were shocked by how many monsters were appearing non-stop. The town residents stayed indoors. A woman held her children close, trembling as she told them to stay calm, saying everything would be fine and that someone would surely come to protect them. Reina spread her magic across the entire labyrinth area, and all the monsters at the entrance were consumed. Burning with anger, she muttered fiercely to herself, questioning why she had to save a man who had been so suspicious of her. Even so, she continued going deeper and deeper into the cave. She thought to herself that Rostein Wintersnow was a character she did not remember from the game, which felt strange. When she played the game as the Saintess, many characters worth targeting appeared, and she clearly remembered that Rostein was not among them. He wasn't even a strategy character. She wondered why such a side character who never existed in the game looked so beautiful. Girl, is that really what should be bothering you right now? Come on already and save our man. Annoyed, she muttered that no matter how cute he was, she still hated people who were harsh and unkind. She arrived at a large door and concluded that the labyrinth stone must be inside. She opened it, believing the Duke would be there, and thinking by now the Northern Labyrinth had been completely neutralized. Meanwhile, in the east, at the temple, the Crown Prince arrived and caused a scene, loudly demanding the High Priest to come out. "You were looking for me?" the High Priest asked calmly from behind. The Crown Prince turned and glared at him angrily. He approached and bowed slightly, and then questioned why support had not been sent to the north when the situation there was so severe. The Crown Prince grabbed the High Priest by the chin coldly, reminding him that for 1,000 years his prophecies had never been wrong. He demanded to know if the High Priest had suddenly lost his spiritual powers in recent days. Furious, he pressed him further, but the High Priest knocked his hand away and told him not to worry, saying that everything was simply meeting the conditions. Back at the Labyrinth Stones location, Reina was shocked when she saw monsters lying dead everywhere. Suddenly, she remembered something she had never realized before. In disbelief, she thought about how she had played the game many times, but could never remember Rostein, the Duke of North. Now she understood why. Every time she started the game, it was always after Rostein had already died. Back at the High Priest's temple, one of the priests rushed in while he was speaking with the Crown Prince, shouting that the altar was shining. The High Priest was stunned. He instantly knew it was the moment the devil had appeared, and that the crisis in the north was tied to Rostein's death. He grinned, thinking that the condition had finally been met, and that the descendant of the Saintess had appeared at last. Below the labyrinth stone, a scene of gruesome slaughter lay before her. Seeing the corpse of the labyrinth boss, Reina's face fell. She could tell immediately that the Duke had held on until the very end, killed the boss, and then collapsed afterward. When she saw the Duke frozen in ice, she found it very strange. She clearly remembered that there were no monsters in the Northern Labyrinth that used ice magic. Seeing this, it's quite obvious that this is the High Priest's doing. Her lady touched the frozen Duke and sadly called out to him, saying the North still needed him. Back in the temple, a saint sitting at the altar complained that they should at least put some cushions under it. At that moment, the High Priest walked in and called at her. Smiling, he approached and addressed her as the Holy Woman, welcoming her into the world. She looked at him in surprise. Back in the Labyrinth Cave, her lady used her magic to try to free Rostein from the ice. Her power slowly melted it, and she was careful not to use too much force so she would not damage his body. "Please come back to life," she begged as she tried her best. When the ice finally melted, his sword slipped from his hand and Reina collapsed to the ground. Her heart broke when he still did not open his eyes. She muttered weakly that it was obvious Rostein's death could not be changed. She felt deep sorrow for a man who had spent his entire life waiting for the devil and fighting monsters, only to freeze to death in a corner of the Northern Labyrinth. She held on to him, asking if this was really the ending meant for Rostein. Unwilling to give up, she shouted at him, telling him he should at least apologize before leaving. "You doubted me for no reason, then pushed me into a corner. How can you die so easily?" she cried, begging him to open his eyes. Her voice softened as she continued to plead. Holding him tightly, they both fell to the ground, and she stayed on top of him, not bothering to get up. She thought sadly about how cold it felt. She wondered how her parents reacted when they learned of her death. Were they happy? After all, their sick daughter who drained their little income was now gone, right? She scoffed bitterly, thinking they must have been relieved because she had made life so hard for them. Slowly, she lifted herself from his chest and looked at him, hoping he had no regrets in this life. Clenching her fist, she vowed that she would not let his sacrifice be in vain. The northern region he had devoted himself to protecting, she would protect it now, so he should not worry anymore. Just then, a loud voice shouted from behind, "Whoa!" She turned immediately. Back at the temple, the Crown Prince asked the High Priest if this had been his plan all along. The High Priest replied calmly that this saint would save the North and then return as a hero. The Crown Prince was left speechless. When he finally spoke, he smirked and said he had heard rumors that the devil had appeared in the North. He asked mockingly if the saint were to run into the devil like this, wouldn't she be eaten right away? At that moment, the saintess appeared, trembling slightly. When Reina turned and saw her, the saint asked in a cautious voice if she was human. Reina froze. She thought to herself, could this woman really be the saint? So the high priest did all of this just to send a hero to save them? Reina wondered how the saint arrived so quickly. She turned away sadly, muttering to herself that it didn't really matter anymore. Even if the saint appeared now, everything was already over. Seeing this, the saintess frowned and called her rude. Reina was confused. The saintess suddenly shouted that she could not believe Reina had attacked an unconscious person. Reina stood up immediately, shouting that it was a misunderstanding and asking what she was even thinking. The saintess settled silent but continued to stare at her suspiciously. Reina stared back, then suddenly remembered something important. The saintess, unlike her, possessed healing and resurrection powers. Just then, Reina noticed the monster slowly disappearing as they absorbed the corpses around them. She immediately called out to the saintess with confidence, saying she had a request. "Use your resurrection magic here on Rostein and the soldiers," she commanded. The saintess froze. Reina reminded her that she was a saintess, and of course she had to save them all. The saintess still did not respond. Instead, she thought to herself, wondering if this woman was truly human, because for some reason she could sense the presence of monsters nearby. "No, it's not possible," the saintess finally said with a stiff expression. Reina was shocked and asked what she meant by that. The saintess explained clearly that she did not encounter a single monster on her way there, so she was still at level 1 and had not unlocked her resurrection skill yet. This is totally messed up. Reina was stunned and suddenly realized why. She had burned all the monsters earlier, which meant the saintess never had a chance to fight any. Reina took matters into her own hands. She dragged the saintess outside to search for a monster, and luckily they found one. Reina instructed her to kill it, which she did. After a lot of stress, the saintess finally unlocked her resurrection skill. She was happy, but Reina was exhausted, having to search the entire town just to find monsters. Reina told her to resurrect them now, and the saintess did as told. However, Rostein did not wake up, leaving Reina confused. "Why isn't the resurrection magic working?" Reina asked, then suddenly froze. Could it really be that Rostein's death could not be changed? The saintess panicked and said that was not the case. Instead, she explained that she had targeted the wrong thing and accidentally resurrected the boss monster instead of Rostein. Reina was shocked and disappointed at the same time. With a single strike, she defeated the boss monster, killing it again. You see that? If only Rostein had agreed to take her help, none of this would have happened. The saintess was stunned that Reina had taken down the boss monster with just one hit. Reina glared at her and told her to resurrect Rostein properly this time, without making any mistakes. The saintess nodded quickly in fear. Finally, Rostein was resurrected. He opened his eyes and slowly rose from the ground. The saintess squatted beside him and softly asked if he was awake. He looked around, taking in his surroundings, and when he saw Reina standing before him, he lowered his head tiredly and thanked them. Then he turned to the saintess and said she had saved his life. The two stared into each other's eyes, while Reina stood there watching. She frowned and muttered to herself, wondering if this strange feeling was jealousy. They returned to the town where the people cheered for the Duke and the Saintess, praising them for returning safely and conquering the Labyrinth Stone. Reina, on the other hand, headed straight back to the Abyss Mansion. She sighed, thinking that things should finally be peaceful now. Just then, she heard a horse approaching from behind. She turned and saw Rostein. He dismounted and called out to her, holding a document in his hand. He told her it was done. She took it and realized it was a document transferring ownership of the Abyss Mansion. Rostein told her he was returning it to her. Reina was shocked. Is this his way of saying thank you? This guy. She asked why he was giving it to her so easily. Deep down, she knew she had just hit a jackpot. Rostein explained that in the north, the Abyss Mansion was a place no one wanted to buy, let alone receive for free. Reina was stunned, her smile fading. She asked if it was really that dangerous and unlivable. Rostein told her she had made a foolish choice. She snapped back angrily, asking if he was trying to start a fight. He sighed and said there was not even basic food in the north. The people lived in poverty, and no nobles ever came because there was nothing to gain. He added that anyone could see living there was not a wise decision, yet she had come so innocently and chosen to live among the people. She had saved him and also saved the north. Looking back, the fact that the princess chose to stay here might have been the last mercy the gods showed me, he said, leaving her speechless. Rostein continued, saying that all the residents had seen her black flames burning at the edge of the fortress. Reina remembered that before entering the labyrinth to save him, she had surrounded the fortress area with flames. Rostein told her that the residents believed those black flames were the reason they survived. He grew quiet, thinking about how Reina was able to share warmth even with Luca, something he could never do. He looked at her seriously and admitted that the reason he had doubted and cornered her was because he was jealous. Reina was shocked. He told her it was because of the power she possessed. Rostein suddenly dropped to one knee, begging her to forgive his foolish actions. He asked if her pledge to protect the North was still valid. Oops, how did he know she pledged to protect the North? Rostein reached out his hand toward her, asking her to allow him to praise her in front of everyone. Reina was too shocked to speak. She remembered how she had promised to protect the North back in the Labyrinth stone cave. Letting out a small smile, she said, that meant he heard everything. Meanwhile, from behind, all her servants, including Veronica, were watching everything unfold from the doorway. They were stunned to see the Duke kneeling before their lady. Reina smiled and placed her hand in his. Rostein gently kissed her hand like a true gentleman, and neither of them could stop smiling. Even Chase, Rostein's knight, stood there in shock as he watched the scene. One would think he was confessing his love to her. It's so cute. Reina followed Rostein back to the town, the two of them riding on separate horses. When the people saw her, they cheered happily and waved at her. Reina smiled back at them. The crowd shouted with joy that her black flames had not harmed them, but instead protected them. "Long live Lady Reina!" they shouted together. Reina could hardly believe it. The same people who were once afraid of her magic were now smiling brightly at her. She remembered her previous life, how she had been a burden to her parents for so long, and how much she had wished to make them proud even just once. A wave of sadness passed over her. Rostein noticed and asked why she looked sad. She glanced at him and replied that she was only thinking about her family. Hearing that, Rostein remembered what her father once said about her being the gateway to evil. He called out to her and said that if she permitted it, he would like to become her family. Reina was stunned. Her eyes widened as she realized what she had just heard. Was that a proposal? Reina thought to herself that she really must be beautiful if even the Duke could not resist her charm. She was caught off guard when Rostein explained that he did not mean just himself, but that she should consider everyone in the North as her family because she had done so much for them. So that's what he meant, she murmured to herself. Still, one thing was certain, the entire North truly felt like family now. She frowned slightly as she imagined it all in her head in a very silly way. Just then, the entire place fell silent as the Saintess stepped forward, holding her staff. Everyone began sharing for the Saintess, and Reina watched quietly. She thought about how, in the original game story, the Saintess alone conquered the Northern Labyrinth, and this moment was never meant for her. But now, with everything unfolding so differently, she wondered how the story would continue from here. It was clear the game had strayed from its original path, making her wonder if that would truly become a problem after all. Meanwhile, deep within the Northern Labyrinth, black flames gathered as a monster began to form. When it fully took shape, a voice echoed, ordering it to disguise itself so it would not raise suspicion. In an instant, the monster transformed into a human, a small boy with black hair and red eyes. Oh my gosh, did the real Demon King just manifest, and in the form of a child? This is really bad. Back in the north, life slowly returned to normal. Watching the people move freely through the streets, Reina thought to herself that while the demons were gone, the suffering caused by cold and hunger still remained. She clenched her fist, remembering Rostein's words about considering everyone in the north as her family. Perhaps because she had heard those words, she now felt a strong desire to help them. Her lady released her flames and they spread across the entire area. Everyone gasped in shock. As they observed closely, they realized the cold had vanished, replaced by a gentle warmth. The people wondered how such a thing was possible and concluded it must be the Saintess's magic. Reina thought to herself that maintaining warmth in every home required an enormous amount of magical power. But thanks to the experience she gained from destroying the Northern Labyrinth and reaching this level, she now possessed overwhelming strength. Having reached level 1000, her power had grown immensely. Watching her black flames glow, she realized she could finally control her magic. She smiled to herself, thinking that this was the power of level 999, and it felt incredibly satisfying. Meanwhile, on the other side, the high priest was in shock when he saw that the Saintess was still only at level 30. The Saintess laughed foolishly and said that Reina had already cleared the Northern Labyrinth by the time she arrived there. The high priest sighed, quietly mumbling Reina's name to himself, and how it was not a name he was used to hearing warmly. He told the Saintess that it was very strange because she was supposed to reach level 100 after conquering the entire Northern Labyrinth. Since the Northern Labyrinth has already been taken care of, for your own benefit, I will assign you a special training instructor for special training, he said, leaving the Saintess completely surprised. On the other side of town, a group of young men were traveling together. One of them complained angrily that they were hired to suppress the Demon King, only to be kicked out without being paid properly. Another asked if it was really true that the Demon King was here. The man replied that that was what people were saying, and he even heard that the Demon King was quietly hiding at the north tip. The young man, who was lying down with his face covered, suddenly lifted his hat when he heard the words Demon King. "The Demon King is in the north?" he asked. The man nodded and said that it was true. The young man smiled as he removed his hat completely and proudly declared that he, Kalain, the champion of justice, could not stand by and watch. Who could this be? Another dramatic character? I really hope he doesn't become a problem because there are already too many. Luca sat on the roof, staring into the empty space ahead of him, while Rostein watched from the window. He felt a deep sense of sadness, yet also relief, thinking to himself that, thanks to Reina, the northern residents, Luca, and everyone else had finally regained stability. He smiled softly, knowing in his heart that he must repay her. Just then, his butler walked in, and Rostein questioned him about the assassination incident, questioning whether the culprit had been found yet. The butler replied anxiously that he had managed to narrow the suspects to some extent, but there was a problem. Rostein frowned in confusion and asked him what the problem was. Back in the town, Reina was sharing food as usual with the orphans, who rushed over happily. Reina handed the food to them cheerfully, and the kids collected it with gratitude, smiling brightly. Just then, she felt someone tug at her garment. She turned instantly and was surprised to see a small boy holding on tightly. The little boy had black hair and red eyes, and he clung to her garment calmly. Reina wondered who he was, as she had never seen such a child here before. She asked around, and a woman explained that they had only recently begun taking care of him. The guards on patrol had found him walking down the mountain barefoot and brought him here. The boy stayed close to Reina, and the woman explained that he hadn't spoken a single word, that they didn't know his parents or even his name. She added that it was strange the child seemed to follow Reina so willingly. Reina was surprised that such a frail child could walk down the mountains barefoot. I really want her to take pity on him, but this child is demonic. Who knows what his mission is? The boy stared at Reina and smiled faintly. Reina squatted to his level and asked softly what his name was, but he did not respond. She told him she would come again next time and that he should take good care of himself until then. Reina woofed him there and climbed onto her horse. As she rode, she looked back and saw the boy still staring at her. She wondered why he paid her this kind of attention and why he seemed to care only about her. Muttering to herself, she admitted she didn't have the confidence to raise someone. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cold forest, Kalan walked alone, shivering in the biting wind. He gritted his teeth, feeling the cold tearing at his flesh. He concluded that the north was not only freezing, but filled with hunger, and that everything here was at its limit. Yet, he refused to be defeated by the weather. "I, Kalan, the warrior of justice, will overcome this with my willpower," he shouted. Before he could take another step, his body gave out and he collapsed onto the frozen ground. Seriously? Poor guy, he really knows how to talk. Just then, a woman noticed him lying there and immediately began shouting for help. She took him in and gave him hot soup. She apologized, saying this was all she could offer, though she wished she could give him more. He reassured her it was fine, but she looked sad and told him he should go back to the south because the north was cursed by the Demon King. Kalon sighed at the mention of the Demon King. He thought about how the Demon King had been tormenting the northern residents all this time. Shoving a spoonful of soup into his mouth, he pouted and muttered to himself that the Demon King should wait and see. No matter where it was hiding, he, the warrior of justice, would find it and make it pay for all its sins. Back at the Abyss Mansion, the servants were shocked when Reina returned with a child. They asked who he was, and Reina smiled, slightly confused, realizing she had ended up bringing him home. She's just too kind. Who could leave such a cute kid staring behind when she has a big mansion? The other servants tried to play with the boy, asking what his name was, but he hid behind Reina. They were surprised to see that the boy really only followed her around. Night fell, and Reina ended up lying on the same bed as the boy. Facing each other, she told him that since he was feeling anxious, she would sleep with him just for tonight. Starting tomorrow, he would have to be brave and sleep on his own. Asked if he understood, and he nodded quietly. Looking at the child, Reina saw her past self. She concluded that he must have been abandoned because he was too weak and frail. Muttering softly to herself, she said it was heartbreaking that someone could leave him barefoot in the cold. Reina decided to give the boy a name. She told him she would call him Trevor and asked if he liked it. Is it just me, or does this child look like Rostein somehow? Before falling asleep, her lady told him to grow healthy and strong so that one day his parents would truly regret abandoning him. The next morning, her lady woke up and sat up, rubbing her eyes. She turned to Trevor to ask if he had slept well, but she froze in shock. It was no longer the little boy she had tucked in the night before. Instead, a young man with long black hair lay beside her. She couldn't believe her eyes and screamed, asking who the hell he was, because he was definitely not Trevor. Back at the temple, the saintess walked happily, for today was the day her training would begin. She remembered clearly that the high priest had told her Paladin Adin would be her instructor. Just from hearing his name, she was already excited. She wondered what kind of person he was and if he was more handsome than the high priest. The saintess was so shocked when she saw her breakfast that she had to ask the chef what it was. He explained that it had been planned and instructed by Adin. She had no choice but to eat it, no matter how full she already felt. She arrived at the main training site wearing her training gear and greeted the guard happily. But her excitement immediately turned into shock when he told her she was 5 minutes late. Because of her tardiness, she had to run 5 laps around the training ground since Lord Adin did not forgive lateness. "What?" she shouted angrily, having no choice but to run while complaining the entire way about how strict he was. While she ran, Adin stood on the stairs watching her. He thought to himself that he had been entrusted with an important task and that he must ensure this holy lady could protect the world. He knew he must train her properly no matter what it took. At the Rubelite ducal estate, the Duke was shocked when Rostein demanded an apology. Rostein stood firmly, saying he could not arrest the Duke because he held the title, so it was better for him to apologize to Lady Reina for sending an assassination team after an innocent girl. The Duke glared and shouted, insisting that the princess was guilty. "Didn't you see her use black magic? That power itself is a sin," he yelled. Rostein's anger flared. He drew his sword instantly and told the Duke that just as he had said, his lady's power was not righteous. The Duke fell to the ground in terror. Rostein swung his sword in another direction, sending it flying toward the Duke's golden statue. "No power is righteous," he said coldly. "It only depends on who wields it." The sword sliced the statue in two, leaving the Duke utterly shocked. With a very cold and bitter expression, Rostein continued, "With that black magic, Reina saved the people of the North. If you dare to harm her just because she uses black magic, the Winter Snow family will not stay still." Rostein turned and left, leaving the Duke on the ground, grinding his teeth in anger and frustration. Back at the Abyss Mansion, Trevor stood frozen in front of everyone, who stared at him in confusion. They couldn't believe how much he had grown overnight. Reina herself, standing beside him, was surprised at his sudden growth and wondered why he followed her. Observing his transformation, she concluded that he was indeed a monster child. She found a necklace with a red marble at its center and carefully placed it around him as he sat before her. Trevor glared coldly at it. Reina murmured to herself that it was a necklace designed to control magical powers. With it on him, he would not be able to harm anyone. Though Trevor was indeed a monster, she thought that if she, the Devil King, raised him, he would not be difficult to control. Trevor was momentarily shocked, but when her lady hugged him warmly and told him they should get along well, his expression softened as he looked at her. Things really are getting complicated now. Back in the town, the people waited eagerly as the food delivery carriage approached. The knights called out to everyone to come collect food from the east immediately it landed. Excitedly, everyone gathered and was guided into orderly lines. Immediately, Chase lifted one bag, froze, and when he opened it, he couldn't believe what was inside. "It's full of stones?" he lamented. So, did the Rubelite Duke send stones to the north for payback for the Duke harassing him? Or is the High Priest also behind this? People caught stealing food were immediately arrested and taken away by the soldiers. Rostein entered the underground prison where they were kept. One of them begged to be given a chance. He couldn't help thinking that the number of people punished for stealing food was increasing, and the food shortage was becoming severe. Looking at the stores, he knew that this little amount of food wouldn't last them long, so he needed to find a solution. This is so frustrating. Now that he has picked a fight with Duke Rubelite, they really wouldn't be getting any food from him. Rostein met a woman and she told him that their facilities were still okay because Lady Reina provided them with crops grown in the greenhouse. The Duke was shocked. He didn't even know a greenhouse existed. At this point, I really don't know what use Chase was as a knight monitoring them when the Duke doesn't even know about little matters like this. Back in the Abyss greenhouse, Reina was thrilled to see how much the cherry tomatoes had grown and looked so healthy. The coachman appeared and announced that Duke Rostein was visiting, leaving her confused. Seated in the living room, Reina asked irritably if he was implying that they wouldn't receive food aid because he had fought with Duke Rubelite. She yelled, demanding to know why he fought with him in the first place. Although he's my father, I can't deny he's really a jerk. But wouldn't it have been better to apologize vaguely and bring the food supply? She asked. Rostein replied that he couldn't do that, explaining that it was a matter of his honor. Reina was more pissed, thinking to herself, will his precious honor magically put food on our tables? She sighed and reminded him, asking if the Northerners weren't important to him anymore. Rostein hesitated but agreed he couldn't ignore the food shortage. Then he cautiously brought up the greenhouse, hinting that he had a plan. Reina was confused and wondered what plan he had regarding the greenhouse. Rostein took Reina out to the site, and she was amazed when they arrived. He showed her a location that used to be the granary of the north. She could see it was vast and expansive. He said sadly that all the grains which once fed the people came from here, but now the temperature was too low for any cultivation. He glanced at her and asked if they could make this place like her greenhouse. Surprised, she decided to survey the area herself. She told him it wasn't her decision to make alone and that Veronica needed to come and inspect the place to see if it was promising. Rostein showed her that it didn't snow here because it was close to the east. Her lady frowned, saying it was too vast to convert into a greenhouse. She admitted that she still had some remaining magic powers. She couldn't maintain heating in such a large area. It wasn't even the size of a village unit. She scratched her head and muttered, "It's nearly impossible to create heating or plumbing in this world." Then she froze, mumbling to herself, "Why am I even thinking we can't do this here? Can't I make it happen?" At the small western town, a servant came excitedly to his chief, saying he had brought a skilled craftswoman to make a safe. The old woman replied warmly, welcoming her. She took the craftswoman to the location of the golden statue Bat, and the woman was amazed. The old woman explained that the statue was a treasure that must never disappear from the town, and pleaded with the craftswoman to make a sturdy safe to store it. The craftswoman grinned and assured her that she would make a safe that no one could open. After all, I'm the craftswoman craftswoman Eileen, so rest assured, she said. I find this woman really suspicious. What was that grin about? She looks like a thief, actually. Meanwhile, back in the north, Kalen finally arrived at the Abyss Mansion. From afar, he could see the mansion and thought to himself that he had finally reached the place where the Demon King stayed. He confidently covered his head, thinking he would start by using an invisibility spell to observe the entire area. I actually feel sorry for this guy. His manner of death would be funny and the easiest. Using his invisible spell, he managed to enter the mansion, thinking to himself that he had to see what kind of person the Demon King was. Trevor, whose back had been facing the window, suddenly turned and glanced in Kalen's direction, making him wonder what the boy was up to. That expression is really dangerous. Would his invisible spell actually work on a monster? This is where this part of the story ends. If you love this story and you want us to continue, please comment the protagonist's name, Reina.